Welcome back to Tabletop Tinkerer, the channel where we try to fix, enhance, and otherwise tinker with all things tabletop RPGs. My name's Dylan, and today we are going to go through our very first archetypical character build with something I call the Diviner of the Stars, a prophet or oracle type, and I'll tell you exactly how to do it in this video. Archetypical builds are a different way to look at multiclassing. It is a way to inform your character decisions, to make them easier, and actually give you a how and a why of what you are doing. With the Diviner of the Stars, we are looking for the goal of becoming an oracle or prophet type character, a character that is not seen very often or focused on within D&D 5e. In fact, there are not a lot of options that we can take a pathway to carving out this type of archetype for our character for the long-term play. What we want to do to create this character is have two different classes, the Druid and the Wizard, specifically looking at subclasses that will allow for the types of abilities of prophecy and foretelling the future to be made not just a possibility, but in fact a reality. For this build, we are going to take 2 levels in the Circle of Stars for the Druid, and the rest will be in 18 levels if we get to level 20 of the School of Divination from the Wizard class. Now, if you stick around to the end of the video, I will offer up an additional level that you can substitute one of your Wizard levels for to add a little extra to the lore of this build and tie everything together if you're looking to potentially get a little mad with your character build. When looking at the Circle of Stars and the Druid, it gives us a roadmap of how and why we get to use our divination powers in the Wizard. It gives us a starting point. With the Divination Wizard, the problem that I sort of have with it, and a lot of the things with 5e, is that it doesn't give you a clear how. And that makes the system very modular. That really allows you to do whatever it is that you want with it, but it leaves some desire when it comes to direction. And sometimes at the table, you'll say I use an ability, but it can be hard to imagine the why and the how, and sometimes the DM or GM fills in that why and how, describing it for you. And sometimes it just goes, well, I use the potency ability, which is the core class feature of the Divination Wizard, where you can roll 2d20s and substitute them for rolls throughout your adventuring day later on down the road. The purpose of the Circle of Stars Druid, the 2 levels that we take at the beginning of this build, is to provide that information for the how and why of our powers that we find ourselves using with the Divination Wizard. We will find ourselves drawn to the stars, using it as our tool for the powers, not just for the Druid, but also for the Wizard. It will link everything together and make it very synonymous, have everything work together. It won't be so much that you have Druid abilities and you have Wizard abilities. You will have abilities that your character uses with the goal of completing the tasks of an oracle or prophet for your group, being an information gatherer and distributor of knowledge and teller of things to come. It will include doing things like looking at the stars the night before and seeing what they say, making rolls as the mechanics determine, and allowing your GM to interact with you and your character in this way to tell a more enriched story with further detail about how it is that you're using these abilities and what they mean for the world at large and how your party is going to interact with it. This will become so core to your game, doing this and interacting with the astrology around you and using your star map, that if you play a character that doesn't have this core function later on down the road, you will realize that something is missing. Meaning that doing this is enhancing your gameplay 100%. There are mechanical reasons as well. These 2 subclasses work together in a few different ways, beyond just the flavorful context that can go together quite well. You're going to be finding yourself without a lack of spell slots a very, very important resource for any spellcaster, of which the Druid and Wizard are both full casters. With the Circle of Stars Druid, you are going to be getting free casts of Guiding Bolt based off your Wisdom modifier. Therefore, you don't have to use spell slots to use it. Now, this will be at level 1, so if you want to upcast it and do more damage, you will still have to use your spell slots in that instance. However, with the Divination Wizard, you are going to be generating extra spell slots at diminishing returns, but still more spell slots than you would otherwise have. For at certain levels of spell slots, when you cast a divination spell, you will generate a spell slot of 1 tier below. So if you cast a 5th level divination spell, you will generate a 4th level spell slot that you can use for any spell. With the Circle of Stars Druid, we will also be using the dragon version of the Starry form, which will enhance our abilities in the form of concentration checks on spells that we use to control the battlefield. See, this archetype, as a prophet and oracle should be expected, is not really battle-centric or focused. That does not mean it cannot have things to do in battle, but it is going to be much more of a helper, of an aid, than looking for direct confrontation. This will also open the door to other feat options that you could otherwise take. Warcaster is often a common choice for spellcasters, whether they find themselves in the front line or not. If you find yourselves on the front line as a spellcaster, Warcaster makes a lot of sense, but it can still be tempting, specifically as a battlefield controller, for that advantage on concentration checks. But we have already taken care of that with our Starry form if we choose to focus on the dragon form. Which means we can take other things like Fey or Shadow Touched. In this instance, I think Fey Touched makes a little bit more sense. Although, if we're looking to the stars, Astral Touched would make a lot more sense, but that is not a feat that exists. So we take Fey Touched, flavor it to be where we brushed up with entities in the stars above, and that's how we get this power here. Also, free Misty Step is never a bad thing. Skill Expert to focus on some of our knowledge abilities, and Meta Magic Adept to further exert our control that we gleam from messing with the fates and the weave of things by consulting with the stars and giving it a little nudge, in ways that we wouldn't be able to without taking a level in Sorcerer or otherwise. Which leads me to the bonus that I mentioned earlier. The Mad bonus. And by Mad, I mean multiple ability dependent, of course. And that's why I added as a bonus and not a core function to this build, because it does take some buying, and unless you're rolling for stats and roll really high, it may not be viable, especially if you're playing at an optimized table. There are 2 choices here, both of which are going to require you to have at least a 13 in Charisma, one the Sorcerer and one the Warlock, the Aberrant Mind or the Great Old One. What this adds is just an extra part of the story as to the how and the why. You see, with both of these subclasses from the Sorcerer or Warlock, we derive some of our power then from a being among the stars, something Lovecraftian. With that said, would you take these levels in Sorcerer or Warlock? What would you do with the build? What spells would you add for yours? What race would you pick? What other things might you add? What substitutions would you make for class options? Would you use the Circle of Stars at all, or would you choose a different option for your Oracle or Prophet? Let me know in the comments below, and let's get this conversation going. And the final task that I have for you in this workshop is to go ahead and give the video a like. And with that, our doors are going to close for this week until we open again on Monday with a brand new video. To be alerted when that drops at the exact hour, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can be alerted in your feed. Until then, when our doors open back up, have a great week, and I'll see you then.